Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to go big picture, effects of intermittent fasting combined with physical exercise on cardiometabolic outcomes, a systemic review and meta-analysis of clinical studies, as well as combined versus independent effects of exercise training and intermittent fasting on body composition and cardiometabolic health in adults, a systemic review and meta-analysis. So what the heck does that mean for you as someone who is adopting an intermittent fasting lifestyle? Well, we're going to break it down for you. And we're going to go big picture on different fasting types and different applications and blood markers and cardiometabolic mortality rates and risks, and really just go from a perspective that we want a fasting lifestyle to adapt us to improve our quality of life, reverse disease, prevent disease, increase our day-to-day function and how we feel. And fasting's done that for both you and I, Tommy. So if you are new to the podcast and you're like, I'm not sure if this is for me, head back to episode 1, give us a listen. You'll hear exactly how fasting has transformed our lives and the simple steps that we took in order to make those changes, not just personally, but now as we've helped, approaching 3.5 million downloads and almost 6,000 people through our challenges and hundreds of folks going through our coaching programs. But we want to invite you on this journey with us. So shout out quickly to the fasting fam, the OGs of the group, the long-term listeners. We appreciate y'all for continuing to tune in and check in with us and make us part of your health and wellness journey. So most folks come to fasting for weight loss, but we know it is so much more than that. So today we're going to talk about fasting, and we're going to talk about fitness, and not fitness, the whole pizza, fitting this whole pizza into your fasting window, right? Into your eating window, or fitness this, go-to high hedonic foods that have gotten you partly in this spot to begin with, if you're looking to lose weight and get healthy once again. So we're going to talk about fitness in terms of exercise and what that looks like. So Tommy, with that introduction, sir, where would you like to start with today's conversation? Because I think both of these studies that we're going to be pulling stuff from has some really cool takeaways.
Yeah, well, there's always the question of, okay, so I'm coming to fasting, and I've exercised in the past. Maybe you've learned in the past that you can't out-exercise a bad diet. I know I tried to many times when I was tracking macros and calories and, hitting the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week. And a lot of the exercise drive for me was not based on health. It was based on accelerating the fat loss process. That was my main reason to do it. And,
exercise to lose weight is what I just heard.
Correct. Yeah. And as a byproduct of that, I had a lot of benefits that were happening, but I was still all the while feeling very frustrated because it wasn't accelerating my fat loss efforts, or maybe it was just not to the point that I had expected. So just understanding some of the benefits for exercise, why it matters, even if and when fasting is working well for you, whether you're looking to lose weight or not, is I feel like fundamental and something a lot of us need to kind of marry with our understanding of fasting as we're adopting a fasting lifestyle, because a lot of times we kind of come to fasting, it's more helpful than what we've tried in the past, but we can carry around the exercise in the wrong with the wrong perspective if it's coming with the old diet mentality and diet baggage, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the lifestyle component, right? So we want you to walk away from today's episode with 1 or 2 things you can put into your day-to-day life, right? We want you to go do it now, not wait, not plan, not forget, the plan, but actually apply it. Not the knowledge is not the key; it's the application of it, right? So
Right.
when we're looking at the exercise component, I'm with you. I grew up we exercise really because you have to, right? Like especially when you're playing sports, and then exercise turned into a hobby. But then it really didn't last too long from a hobby because it was always trying to get bigger and stronger. I was powerlifting background. I know you had the same, not in any professional sense. But that was the type of, workouts that I gravitated to. Then the gym became well, now I need to burn some calories to lose some weight. Right. And then it was, my labs are a little bit off and I know this is a good thing for me. So now it's almost like a burden of, okay, I need to do this because I need to get healthy. Right. So,
right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Right. And hopefully that resonates with some of y'all. So when you come to fasting, the biggest questions we hear and the kind of the thought process, all right, I need to lose weight. Right. All right. Well, let me try fasting. Okay. So the question we get is, what's the best fasting schedule? Well, the one that you can stick with. What's the best diet? The one you can stick with. What's the best workout plan? The one that you can stick with, right? And I'm not trying to be cheeky here or coy in any way.
Right.
But the reason I love these two studies that we're talking about is because we're going to go big picture, right? So the studies are going to look at whether combining intermittent fasting, some form of time-restricted feeding, right? TRF or TRE, time-restricted eating. You've heard us talk about these terms in terms of studies and how the studies were designed, study design, and how they looked at control groups versus fasting groups, et cetera. So we're going to look at whether different forms of fasting with exercise is better for heart and metabolic health compared to just exercising with a, air quotes, regular diet. So that's why I said big picture. So when we're looking at the table, and this is, again, one of the studies is aptly named, very wordy, effects of intermittent fasting combined with physical exercise, systemic review and meta-analysis of clinical studies, right? So we're talking gold standard here. So they went through a criteria of identification, screening, eligibility, and they came up with 14 different studies. And we're looking at all different groups of people. Folks that had metabolic syndrome, had obesity, well-trained middle distance runners, overweight, healthy male students, healthy trained men, healthy lean women, normal weight, obesity with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, et cetera, et cetera. Folks that had metabolic issues or cardiometabolic issues or were in the high-risk categories for that stuff in the overweight and obese categories, right? So looking at to the question of what's the best fasting schedule, it's like, well, we've got a study in here that's on Ramadan fasting. We've got a 5-2. We have a 16-hour fasting, 8-hour feeding, right? We'll push back on that terminology, right? Because that's the whole fitness, all of these foods into my feeding window, right? We like to call it a nutrition window.
Right.
Lots of 16-8s. We got some ADFs, some modified ADFs. So where you eat every other day or you have a mini meal, right? Alternate day fasting, right? Then you've got, some 14-hour, some early dinner to breakfast, right? Windows. So really the starting point for a lot of folks that come to fasting are going to fall into the 5-2, the ADF, or some version of the 16-8, 14, 16, 18-hour kind of fasting window when you first start with fasting, right?
Yeah. And so when we look at those, at some of those windows, and we've talked about studies in the past where we're comparing some of those and which one gets the best outcome. And typically speaking, the longer the fasting goes up to a certain point, the better the results on a lot of those. So if we see like a 12-hour fast with a 12-hour eating window,
that's not fasting.
Right. It might confer a little benefit of, between that versus eating all day. But as we start to kind of ratchet that up, then typically the results get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, all the way to the point of what's probably the longest fast that's most commonly studied is probably in the alternate day range. Every once in a while, we'll review a study that has an extended fast, and those get interesting too because a lot of the benefits start to kind of hit a peak at some point, and then start to come down after that. So it's interesting. But what we do know is that when we get very consistent with our fasting, then the results come more consistently. And if we find ways, or when we find ways to adapt it into a lifestyle, then we get to kind of link those results together over time. So that's great. So then what are the results that we're looking for? We see, typically we're looking for movement in certain key blood work markers, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, perhaps inflammatory markers like CRP, IL-6, and a few others. And then we also have things like body composition, like visceral fat. What is the deposition of fat? How does that look like? Because we can be skinny fat where the scale is rewarding us, but at the same time we have
poor metabolic health because we have no muscle.
Yeah, correct, right? and so that's not a good place to be, and the scale doesn't really tip us off to if that's happening or not. But one of the best ways to prevent that is to induce or bring in an exercise component into our wellness routine, and that's kind of where it's really cool to see what the results of this study were and how they designed it too.
Yeah. And I love that it was all different groups, all different, because that's the big picture process here is like we looked at some high intentional interval training. We looked at some moderate heart rate training. There was some, just some habitual physical exercise monitoring. There was 30 minutes of slow running versus intermittent sprints versus max sprints. There was power sports training, 9 hours a week, 3 times a week. That was in the one study, the male group of studying physical education, right? There's resistance training. There's dynamic exercise. There's moderate intensity aerobic exercise. There's moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise. All different variations of the resistance HIIT kind of formulation, as well as if we look at the exercise component, then we look at the energy intake component. There was all different variations of control groups versus the TRE or the fasting plus the exercise group. And what I like about this is, if we're going big picture, we look at fasting, we look at our exercise, right? We want to bring that into the picture because we're not just doing it to move the scale. Like you were saying, Tommy, we're doing it because it's part of our health journey. Then we're going to look at the energy intake or the food decision side of things. There's lots of variability. The cool thing about this study, which is why we want to talk about it, is that fasting plus exercise compared to regular diet and exercise, because we know the benefits of exercise. We know that they're true. We're going to talk about VO2 max here in just a little bit. Exercise is beneficial for your heart and for your health and for your longevity, right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to argue that anymore.
Right.
Using exercise to get the scale to move, like I'm going to go running because I want the scale to go down, horrible approach. Horrible, right. Not great, been disproven. We want to do more low intensity, steady state. We're not going to go into that conversation here. We've done episodes on that in the past. Get moving, right?
Right.
But the results from this study showed to more weight loss, better improvements in your cholesterol profile, and decreased systolic blood pressure, as well as trends, clinically significant trends with triglycerides and diastolic blood pressure as well. So we're talking direct correlation or outcomes when you fast plus exercise. We're not going to tell you which one, right, to do that works for you. Yeah. But the outcomes, if you look at the actual tables, was the really cool part. In terms of body weight, all studies were on the left side, meaning towards favoring, if we're visually put a line down the middle, you've got IF and exercise on the left, you've got diet and exercise, control diet and exercise on the right. So no fasting on the right. All of them favored a better body weight reduction when you combine fasting plus exercise.
Yeah. And the cool thing that I just heard there was regardless of which category of fasting you put yourself into currently or which category of exercise you most commonly put yourself into. And if it's sedentary or very little exercise right now, you could put yourself into any one of these categories. Like pick one that resonates with you, pick one that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be the perfect protocol. We're not combing the article to go, okay, which one was the perfect one? There wasn't a perfect one, but what we saw was that basically they all had beneficial effects adding to the fasting regimen. And, so we know how to get good results with fasting. We can add in any sort of exercise to boost those results, and then to increase the cardiometabolic, effects and the exercise components as well. So it's cool to see that when you scroll through the table and you see outcomes, and they pretty much all list, body weight or body fat composition, improvements. But then when you see blood markers, like, for example, even with 16-8 with a 3 times per week resistance exercise, and then you're seeing an improvement in HDL, LDL, and triglycerides and total cholesterol right there. So like that's helpful, and it's fairly easy to do with 3 times a week, because you don't need a whole lot of time for that. You just need to sprinkle it throughout the week, in a way that you can get consistency with. Or when you did like the exercise training in a fasted or fed state, they put them into both camps, because we hear that question a lot too. Should I exercise in a
what should I do, right?
or a fed state, right? And then and basically the results show that kind of it all comes out in the wash, because one works a little bit better while you're exercising to burn fat, but then the other one works for a little bit longer afterwards to burn fat. So there's a net no real difference in the fat burn net. And so, but you can take a look at the blood work and see HDL, LDL, again, triglycerides, total cholesterol, and then blood pressure improvement in that. And that was another 16-8 study. So it's really cool to see all of these overlapping results here that are pointing all in the right direction.
And that's really the big picture of, like, so we always ask this question, especially during our challenges, is like, why do you want to lose the weight?
Mm-hmm.
Typically there's a blood marker reason, or a doctor reason, or a prevention of disease reason because of a family or a loved one or diagnosis, right? So it's very reactive, not proactive. We want to make it more proactive. So that's why you're hearing us say, well, what's the best form? Well, the one that you can stick to consistently, right? And we'll give you our best recommendations, depending if you're sedentary or if you've been doing some cardio and it hasn't been working. We'll give you some basic kind of frameworks on what the exercise rhythm should look like for the best results if you're in a weight loss phase. Before we wrap up today, but I just love that you can go marker by marker, right? Because we're doing this for health metrics. Getting the weight off is, in our opinion, one of the most important things you can do, because that's going to then that's a lead measure for the lag measures of seeing the improvements in your labs and in how you feel and in your prevention rather than reaction to said diagnoses and diseases and symptomatology that we typically go to the healthcare system for. So when we look at these studies and these tables, it's cool because all but the HDL was interesting. Because about half fell on the left towards favoring IF and exercise, and the other half didn't. They favored the no, excuse me. That table is inverted. I just read that wrong in real time. It's the only one that's backwards. All the other ones have IF and exercise on the left and control diet and exercise on the right. This is the only one. So no, I'm wrong in preparation when we prep for this conversation. That's crazy. More of the studies in this favored IF and exercise for HDL, which makes sense when you look at the overarching LDL panel, right? The improvements were seen in both groups. So now that makes sense to me. When you look at the LDL, all but one of the studies favored IF and fasting and exercise. Triglycerides, one was on the middle line, like right on the line in the middle. All the others favored IF and exercise. Total cholesterol, all but one, right? It must have been that same study, favored IF and exercise. Systolic and diastolic blood pressure, the same. So those trends are there in that overall benefit of how we're going to apply fasting and how we're going to apply some form of movement to your weight loss and health protocol. I mean, there's so many different variations here. It's really like, just do something. Like, just start with a fasting window. And like, even if you're sedentary, just start with getting your steps in, not 10,000. Start with 5,000, then go to 7,500. And you know what? Stop right there, because the research now shows that's pretty much the sweet spot for decrease in all-cause mortality.
All right.
7,500 steps. Figure out how to get it in. Park at the end of the parking lot. Take the stairs. Set a timer. Get a walking pad for your office, right? Be the crazy person that doesn't eat lunch, that goes for a walk around the office building. Or I go on my hot girl walks out here. We have a little green area. Like, even if I got 30 minutes, I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to take the shirt off, get some sun, and sweat a little bit because it's hotter than heck now here in Houston. And then I'll come back on, throw the shirt back on, boom, back on Zoom, back on coaching calls, right? Like, doesn't matter. You just got to get some form of movement with fasting. You're going to get the benefit, which is why I love this big picture conversation we're having today.
Yeah. And, if we're looking through the table and trying to find some other, takeaways here, what I thought was interesting is that in some of the studies with either the smallest effects or the least amount of beneficial effects, like only body weight versus all the blood work markers, or having effect on less of the blood work markers, what I noticed there is that it's the studies that had the highest intensity or duration of exercise actually had the least amount of benefits.
Say that again.
The studies with the highest intensity exercise or the highest duration of exercise were the ones that had the least beneficial effects when combined with fasting on the blood work markers. Okay. And this is pretty interesting because, there is definitely what was ingrained in me was, keep working, like outwork the,
biggest
outwork the
loser
treadmill
type workout mentality, right?
Outwork the calorie burn and, fuel more of the calorie burn. But when we look at the actual data, there's no questions about it. When we got up into the multiple hours per week and the high intensity kind of stuff, that's where we started to not see benefits, or see much less benefits in the HDL and LDL and triglycerides and et cetera, the blood work markers, because those it's not to say that they shouldn't be done. It's to say that they can decrease the efficiency of the fat burning process and of the health restoration process. So they can be good for exercise results and cardiovascular results, but at the same time, they're not doing you any favors as far as, the scale or the waistline or necessarily the visceral fat too, right?
And that's where the takeaway from the conversation today really should be, okay, what's going to be my plan, right? If you want some guidance on the fasting plan, grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss in the show notes. We'll zoom it into your inbox across the interwebs. It's a free page, 20-page PDF. And it'll give you the who, what, when, where, and why of how to ramp up into some more consistent fasting, right? Now we're talking about exercise and combining that. Well, what does that look like? Well, for me, I'll just tell you what I'm doing right now. I walk every day. I get my steps in. And no, I'm not tracking my steps. I don't have a pedometer. I wear a Whoop. And then I use CGMs from time to time, right, to really hone in and kind of see where I'm at, peek under the hood, right? So I like walking. I do it every single day, sometimes twice a day, depending on the time I have. I like to hit 45 minutes. I got 3 kids under 7, so the rest of my day I'm going to be chasing little ones around and doing things and depositing them at different sports and camps and so I've got the rest of it is I've got plenty of steps, right? And then I'm doing 3. I'll do cold plunge and sauna 5 out of 7 days a week. That's not part of exercise, but there is a heart rate component to sitting in a 200-degree sauna and a heart rate variability component to cold plunging. I will also then do 3 days a week, 3 short 10 to 15 minute kettlebell workouts for my type of resistance training. And then when I'm really just cranking it, giving myself gold stars every week, I will do 2 or 3 20 to 30 minute zone bike rides on the Peloton. So you're like, wow, that seems like an incredible amount of time. And honestly, it's not that much. The walking is about 30 to 45 minutes a day. And then you added another 15 minutes of one of those other things that I just mentioned, right? Either a short kettlebell workout with a 3-minute cold plunge or a sauna session. And you're really able to kind of piecemeal what your week is going to look like. So that's what works for me. But that's not what's going to work for my wife. She's completely different, right? She does her 3 CrossFit workouts a week. She does not do the walking or the sauna. And she does her Peloton rides, and she has 0 visceral fat. and abs after 3 babies, right? Like, okay, I got some more visceral fat before mine show up, right? So I'm just giving you personally, like, you just got to start. So if that's from couch to 5,000 steps instead of couch to 5K, if you guys have ever heard that terminology before, then the benefit is absolutely going to be there for you. We just need to shift, just like the fasting is getting off the dieting roller coaster. Well, this exercise component needs to get away from that old Biggest Loser, no pain, no gain, high intensity. The sweat is the fat burning out of the body, right?
It's true.
Type mentality, because that just isn't accurate in terms of longevity metrics. And we'll talk about specifically one of those longevity metrics here with VO2 max in just a minute.
Okay. And one other thing that I was going to mention is just the fact that as those exercise intervals get longer and longer and more intense, then that can subconsciously affect food decisions and fasting decisions also.
My wife's always hungry.
Yeah. That's the downside of, intense workouts. I mean, your body knows, hey, we've been burning through some fuel. Let's bring some more back in. And so that can make fasting feel a little bit more like white knuckling and things like that. So, kind of finding that balance and knowing that exercise is good and it doesn't necessarily have to be record breaking, high intensity and super long duration in order to get good benefits, So that's a good thing that I wish I knew, years back. That would have been nice.
So I love the second study, Tommy, the one that you had mentioned a couple of quotes, a couple of talking points earlier from, is the one that was in the BMC. And it was the takeaway from this was, in that study, they demonstrate that the combination of exercise and IF produces superior changes in body composition, but not necessarily in terms of cardiometabolic health when compared with exercise or IF alone. So it's that exercise plus IF component again, right? That's going to show the biggest bang for your buck. You're still going to get great results if you're doing, and maybe the next step for you is, well, I'm great at exercising, but I really suck at fasting. Or maybe I'm great at fasting, but I really suck at moving, right? Like, I've gone through ebbs and flows at all incantations of things in between with that. Yeah. So that might be the perspective shift on, okay, what am I going to do moving forward? And I like to, I reserve the right to change my mind, right? I reserve the right to change. I say that to my kids. Yeah, we do dessert a couple of times a week, right? And it's not on any set day, or it's not any special. We do movie nights, and sometimes we'll do, popsicles after the pool, because now that it's hot as heck here. But it's not like, oh, Mondays is dessert day, Tuesday, because we got into this habit of like kids always asking for, really, no, you're not going to have ice cream every day. Okay. Right. Like, come on. So my kids always be like, oh, we can have dessert later. I'll be like, I reserve the right to change my mind based on your behavior. And my daughter, my two older, 7 and 5, now get it. They're like, oh, okay, that means this is a privilege and that can be taken away, right? And we're not military drill sergeants here by any means. But it's just funny because we can think of that as an adult. It's like, okay, do I really need this little snacky snack? Yeah, probably not. Like, where am I not dialed in?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I don't need to be married to my habits, even if it's a long-term thing that I've done over and over again.
Right. Yeah. So that second study mentioned body composition, where the first one we were pulling a lot of the original data from was more about the fact that there are very many different ways to approach a successful fasting and or exercise lifestyle, because you're going to get benefit, because there were so many different variations in the fasting windows. The only fasting window that was not in there, Tommy, you mentioned this very earlier on, I just want to mention again, is the extended fast. And that's where we talk, that's more of an aggressive fat loss strategy. There are some considerations that need to be taken: female versus male, cycle versus no cycle, perimenopause versus menopause, those types of things, which we do coach individually inside of our coaching group, and a little bit inside of our challenges that we do. But I want to go from that body composition kind of conversation where I was like, we reserve the right to change our mind, is that my mind has shifted from a weight loss goal to a visceral fat goal, right? Or a body composition. When you get closer to maintenance, it's more of a body composition goal than it is a weight loss goal. So it's like, you don't just get to the end point and you're like, oh, I made it. Yay, I'm done.
Right.
Well, crap. No, 95% of people, we know the research shows 88% are metabolically unhealthy, and 95% of the people that lose weight give it back plus more. So what do you do then? Well, you need to change your goals. You need to change your targets. And I love that if we're going to talk about biggest bang for your buck, it's going to be visceral fat reduction. It's going to be
waist circumference,
waist height ratio. It's going to be insulin and inflammatory markers if we're talking about labs, right? It's not LDL, okay? It's APOB or LPA or CAC scores, right? We've done episodes on that. Or HOMA-IR for the gold standard of calculating your insulin resistance that takes into it's not just a fasting blood sugar and A1C, but body composition, right? So counteracting the effects of aging and decreased testosterone and menopause, right? So I'm not saying decreased metabolism because that's not accurate. As we age, it's not until much later do we see a decline. So your metabolism just doesn't stop in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. You want to believe that because I wanted to believe it too.
Yeah.
But it's not true. So
that's what we're told.
I know.
The data doesn't show that though.
Right. So this VO2 max conversation falls into this category of something that I need to get. I've never had it. I have my resting. So if I were to look at like, let's say a dashboard of longevity metrics, I would want to have some labs to look at some of the things I just rattled off. Didn't know we were going to end up here. So maybe we'll have lots of questions. I have to do a follow-up. I'm cool with that. And then RMR, resting metabolic rate. Oh, did fasting take my metabolism? No, it actually increased it. I gained lean muscle without working out and or increase my my lean body tissue and my I increased my RMR. It's 3.5% higher than the demographic that I'm in.
Nice.
I know you've had similar response experience, right? Body composition decreased in visceral fat. Sub-Q, not too worried about. Are we directionally accurate? Are we moving in the right direction? Then I would look at strength. So can I do my dead hangs? Can I do my farmer's carry? Can I do a deadlift, right? Grip strength is one of the most researched, most incredible metrics for overall health and decreased risk of mortality. Grip strength. It's been around forever. Well, why don't we test it? You can buy a freaking machine on Amazon for $20.
Yeah.
And then movement, stability, flexibility, et cetera, those types of things. So on this metabolic dashboard, VO2 max is something now. I was just on eBay this morning looking at how do I get a NOE, right? The PNOE. It's the VO2 max. You think of an athlete on a treadmill, like trying to climb Everest, right? VO2 max should be a standard test for every single person because the research is so incredibly powerful on showing how effective it is in terms of moving up the scale, in terms of decreased mortality risk. Sauna is the same way. Like sauna has a relative cardiovascular risk decrease that is you can't argue it. It's inarguable. It is proven. So the same thing with VO2 max and what is it? And then I'll let us unpack it is it's your how do I want to explain the overview of VO2 max? So when we look at VO2 max, it's the maximum rate of oxygen consumption attainable during physical exertion. So it's going to be seeing how well your body can get oxygen in, which is literally like if you stop breathing, you're dead, right? Let's just think of it that way.
Okay.
So you've got low, below average, above average, high, and elite categories. And we want to end up being in the percentiles. So
most of us don't have any idea where we are, though. That's part of the problem. We'll start there.
You need to get tested, right? It's just like, oh, well, skinny fat. Well, I don't know. How much lean muscle? Well, how much weight should I lose, doc? I don't know. What's your body comp? What's your lifestyle? What's your consumption look like? What's your fasting look like, right? Like I need more information. So yeah, great point, Tommy.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about VO2 max, there's only a few ways that like really matter that we should be looking at as far as what's our performance level? What can our body do when it's under stress? Because it doesn't have to be that it's under high aerobic stress, although aerobic stress is how we're going to actually see what our VO2 max is, generally speaking. But it's a good marker for what our body can do even during those short times of stress that we go through day to day, how we're reacting to, even how you're reacting to a late meal or perhaps an alcoholic beverage before going to bed. If you looked at what your body did while you were sleeping and trying to rest and recover and rejuvenate for going into the next day, your VO2 max is a function of how well you're getting that recovery in going into the next day. So it's the applications are daily, even when you're not like being stressed in an aerobic way. So it's like if you take your recovery, for example, or your rejuvenation percent, based on certain markers, certain wearables will do it. You mentioned Whoop earlier.
Yep.
Those will change based on your fasting, on your eating times, on other lifestyle components. Did you work out that day? What was your aerobic output? So the better your VO2 max, the more likely you are to have a better recovery or rejuvenation going into the next day. And so it's an important marker. And then those are highly correlated with your health span, your longevity, and then thus your quality of life and your energy levels all throughout each day. So anything that we can do to improve there is going to have a substantial impact on how we feel and go about our day-to-day lives.
So if we look at these numbers, and we're not going to get into the nitty gritty, I just want to put this out there as kind of like a mental shift. So this is something I'm gonna have the test done. I know it. A colleague of mine who I graduated with back in the day, he has one. It's in his gym, and he trains with a lot of athletes. So we have this idea that this is an athlete thing. Well, that's only the top 5% of people.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm not trying to be in the 5%. Come on, C's get degrees. Like, so if we're looking at these groups, it's low, below average, above average, high, and elite. So top 5%, we're talking elite. So let's just check that my wife still has aspirations of that. So good for her. I'm not going there. When we look at this is coming from someone who had crazy chronic asthma, and that's how I ended up getting into the health space. So breathing for me is pretty important. Going from the low to below average. So we're talking like the two lowest groups is a 50% risk adjusted decrease in all cause mortality. Wow. 50%. It is the biggest bang for your buck. The next, this is great.
Hold on. You made from the lowest to the second lowest, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And then if you go from low to below and then to above average, so just from low to below. So there's 6 categories, right? There's 5 categories, excuse me. The above average is right in the middle. So if you go from low to below, which is the lower 2 categories, you have a 50% reduction. Wow. If you go from low to above average, you have a 60 to 70% reduction.
Wow.
And that increase in reduction goes down moving forward from there. So going from high to elite, nope. Going from above average to high, there's an increased improvement. But I mean, let's just get the first reduction, the biggest bang for your buck. Here's the takeaway. Get moving. Start walking. Start doing some zone training. Start doing some resistance training. Get your heart rate to go up and down. Get some heart rate variability into your day. Doesn't need to be fancy. Doesn't need to be expensive. You don't need the trainer unless you're the type of person that just pays for the person to hold you accountable. That's cool. But we just have to get moving. So I can't wait to get my VO2 max. Well, it's going to be painful. It shouldn't be that bad, actually, because I've done some zone training tests, some FTP tests on the Peloton, and I've done some rowing challenges and stuff. So I figured out my VO2 max from a manual exercise standpoint before, but I've never done it with the fancy machine. So I can't wait to get it done and kind of see where I stand, because now I have a different non-fasting, non-food related goal. And guess what? That taps back in full circle to the why you want to lose the weight in the first place. If you just want to lose the weight to get the scale moving, it's only going to last so long because your willpower is going to tank. And that's just the reality of it.
That's phenomenal. That's so encouraging to know that one category movement going from the bottom category to the next one is such a big, you said 50% increase in all cause mortality.
And if you go up 2 categories, it's up to 70.
Yeah, I mean, that's excellent, because what we saw in this meta-analysis here was that we had a 26% improvement in VO2 max, a 6% better improvement in VO2 max when we combined exercise with intermittent fasting, versus that one was just versus exercise alone. So a lot of those exercisers would be going for a metabolic benefit, an aerobic benefit, like a VO2 max. But when you combine it with intermittent fasting, much, much better results.
I absolutely love it. So we reserve the right to change our mind, right? So this is an evolving thing. It's a moving target. But what we want to continue to do here is to move the needle, to improve. So from a fasting and fitness standpoint, right, you've got some good action steps. If you need support with fasting, head to the show notes. You can grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss. You can join the Fasting for Life community. You can jump into one of our upcoming challenges where we walk through a 7-day Master Your Fasting lifestyle challenge. We talk all things insulin resistance and fasting and schedules and how to adapt this into into a lifestyle. So at this point, Tommy, we're going to wrap up today's conversation. I appreciate the conversation as always, sir, and we'll talk soon.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.